The Swayze Ranch sat quietly at the edge of the San Fernando Valley. Tucked behind iron gates and old oak trees, the Spanish-style estate had been mostly empty since Patrick Swayze passed away in 2009. While some believed his widow, Lisa Niemi, had held on to it for sentimental reasons, others whispered of stranger motives, rumors of unexplained cold spots, the feeling of being watched, and lights that flickered even when the power was off. But all that faded into memory when the house was finally sold in late 2022. The new owners, Mark and Emily Calderon, were a couple in their late 30s. He was a sound designer for film. She had worked in real estate before leaving it behind to write fiction full-time. They weren't rich exactly, but the house had come to them under curious circumstances, a private sale, well under market value, with the condition that they keep the property as is. It was a dream home, at least on paper. 3 bedrooms, a wide veranda, stables, and even a meditation hut out back that Swayze had built himself. The actor had loved horses, and remnants of that life were still their old tack. Photographs of him on horseback. A dusty pair of boots by the barn door that no one had moved. Emily felt it first. On their second night, as she stood in the upstairs hallway just outside the master bedroom, she heard music. Faint, mournful. Not on the radio, not coming from any room they had unpacked yet. It was the piano, but they didn't own a piano. The next morning, she told Mark, laughing nervously as she poured her coffee, "I think the house is haunted by a jazz musician." He looked up from his phone. "You mean a dancer?" By week 3, things got harder to ignore. The piano sound returned, always late at night, always the same low melody. Sometimes it would stop the moment one of them stepped out of bed. Other times it continued as if being played with invisible hands. Emily eventually traced the sound to a sunroom at the back of the house. There was a piano. It had been hidden beneath a canvas, left behind with a few other furnishings from the original owner. A black baby grand, covered in dust, but not enough dust. Someone had touched it recently. Mark brushed it off. Creepy, but not haunted. He believed in acoustics and weird wiring. Old houses do weird things. Emily wasn't so sure. She'd started having dreams. Not nightmares, dreams of dance studios, of a man standing in mirrors with sweat on his back and longing in his eyes. Sometimes she would wake up humming a tune she didn't recognize, but felt like she had heard before. Then came the smoke. One night, while editing a short film in his studio, Mark smelled it, faint cigarette smoke, like someone had just exhaled near him. But Emily didn't smoke. Neither did he. He checked every outlet, every plug. Nothing. That same night, Emily dreamed again. This time, the man in the mirror wasn't alone. He was dancing with her, holding her hand, whispering something she couldn't make out. The turning point came when Emily reached out to someone who had known Patrick Swayze, a former choreographer who had worked with him on Dirty Dancing. "Are you still living in that house?" the woman asked, her voice growing quiet. "Yes, we love it, but strange things keep happening." A pause. Then, "Patrick didn't want to leave. He loved that house more than any of his films. Said he could breathe there, even when he was dying." Emily hesitated. "Do you think he's still there?" "I think if there's anywhere his spirit would stay, it's there." When she told Mark, he finally admitted something he'd been keeping to himself. "2 nights ago, I saw a man in the mirror," he said. "Not a reflection. A man. I thought I was going crazy. He just stood there wearing a tank top and jeans. Looked at me like I was the one who didn't belong." They both sat in silence. Things escalated. Doors slammed in the middle of the night. The chandelier in the entryway swayed on windless days. Music, real, recognizable songs from Ghost and Dirty Dancing would play faintly from rooms without speakers. Emily once found the barn door wide open, even though it had been padlocked for weeks. Inside, fresh hay was scattered, and the smell of horses was strong. But they had no animals. The final straw came when Mark woke up one night to find their bedroom freezing. Breath misted in the air. Emily was sitting upright, eyes wide open, whispering something. He leaned closer. "No one puts baby in the corner," she said. Her voice was her own, but her tone wasn't. "They brought in someone, not a priest, but a kind of spiritual consultant." She walked through the house, silent, then finally said, "He's not malevolent, but he's confused. He thinks he still lives here." Emily asked if they had to leave. "No," the woman said. "But you do have to talk to him. Tell him he's gone. Tell him it's okay." That night they sat in the sunroom, lit a candle. Emily placed her hand on the piano. "Patrick," she whispered, "this was your home, and we know you loved it. We feel you here. But it's time to rest. Thank you for letting us in. It's okay now." For a moment nothing happened. Then a single note on the piano played clear, gentle. The smoke never returned. The music stopped. The house, for the first time in months, felt still. But Emily sometimes still dreams of him, of dancing, of long hallways and quiet music. And in the barn, under a beam carved with the words "Live with Love," the boots remain. No dust has gathered on them since. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The weeks that followed the so-called goodbye brought a tentative peace to the house, but it was not the sort that settles deep in the bones. It was the kind that hovers like fog just above the ground, refusing to rise or vanish. The kind that made Mark check the locks more often and Emily sit a little longer in the sunroom before heading upstairs. They weren't afraid exactly, but they were listening now. There was something about the quiet that felt too deliberate. The oak trees lining the gravel path to the stable had begun to shed early. Autumn in the valley had always arrived gently, but this year the leaves fell in strange clusters, scattered in arcs that almost looked like footprints. Emily noticed this while walking to the barn one morning, drawn there by nothing in particular, just a vague restlessness. The kind that crept up around 10 a.m. when the sunlight hit the veranda just so. She pulled open the barn door, the rusted hinges groaning as always, and paused. Inside it was immaculate. They hadn't cleaned it. They barely used it. Yet the floor was swept. The tack had been arranged neatly on the wall, and the air smelled faintly of leather and cedar. His boots still sat just inside the threshold. No dust, not even a cobweb. A single shaft of light filtered through the slats above, landing squarely on the wooden post where the words "Live with Love" had been carved. Emily had run her fingers over those words dozens of times since they moved in, but only now did she notice the small groove beneath them. It looked like someone had started to carve something else and stopped halfway through. She crouched down, tracing it gently. A partial J. Maybe a name. Maybe not. She stood, heart quickening for reasons she couldn't name, and backed out slowly, letting the barn door close behind her without turning around. That night, Mark stayed up late in his sound studio, headphones wrapped tight around his ears as he edited ambient noise for a streaming horror podcast. Rain, wind, the echo of empty halls, things meant to evoke discomfort. Yet no matter what levels he adjusted, no matter how he layered and faded the tracks, there was something wrong with the background. It wasn't the usual hum. It was rhythmic, not quite static, not quite whisper. It had a pace slow, steady, and then suddenly breaking, like someone catching their breath after dancing too long. Mark sat back, frozen. He removed the headphones. The sound continued, faint, almost imperceptible. But there behind the drywall, behind the house itself, like a heartbeat buried in plaster. He got up and walked into the hall, footsteps soft on the hardwood. The light from his monitor glowed behind him like a lighthouse in fog. Ahead, the house stretched long and dim. The hallway mirror caught him at an angle. He hated that mirror. Emily had insisted they keep it. It had belonged to the house, she said. Felt anchored. Tonight it showed only himself. And then it didn't. A shadow, not his past, just behind him. Shoulders hunched. Familiar. Mark spun. Empty. But the air smelled like sweat. Like wood floors and rehearsal studios. Like worn cotton. Emily was having dreams again. They weren't like before. They didn't feel nostalgic or warm. They were fragmentary, strange spaces stitched together by flickering lights and sound. Long hallways filled with mirrors, staircases that folded in on themselves, and always that low melody from the piano, distant and warbled, as if played underwater. One morning, she woke with her heart racing, mouth dry. She stumbled into the bathroom and flicked on the light. Her reflection stared back, pale and shaken, but behind her, she thought she saw movement. Not a figure, just a sway, like fabric shifting. She turned. Nothing. But the closet door, which she never used, was slightly ajar. Inside, the clothes from the previous owners still hung, a handful of old jackets and a black, dusty hatbox on the top shelf. She'd meant to clear it months ago, but always forgot. Now, compelled, she pulled the step stool from beneath the sink and reached for the box. It was heavier than it looked. She brought it down carefully, placed it on the counter, and opened it. Inside, a stack of photographs. Dozens of them. Black and white. Some color. All of Patrick. Not the movie star, not the red carpet smile. These were private. In dance studios, at home, sweaty and tired, sometimes laughing. In some, he was alone. In others, a woman danced beside him, not Lisa, not anyone Emily recognized. And one photo, Patrick stood in front of a mirror, arms raised above his head, mid-pirouette. But his reflection didn't match the pose. She showed the photo to Mark that night. He didn't speak for a long time. "We need to talk to someone again," he finally said. "Not just some spiritual consultant. We need to know what happened here really happened." Emily nodded, eyes still on the photo. "I don't think he ever left," she whispered. "But I'm starting to think he wasn't the only one here." It rained the following day. Not the usual warm California drizzle, but a slow, gray pour that darkened the stucco walls and turned the gravel drive into soft, sticky earth. The Calderons stayed inside. Emily moved from room to room without purpose, her hand brushing over furniture, trailing the banister, flicking lights off and on again. The house breathed around her. It didn't creak like an old house. It exhaled like it knew she was moving through it, like it was subtly adjusting itself to her pace. She could feel it in the floorboards. A rhythm, a beat, a dance. By afternoon, she had returned to the sunroom, drawn not by curiosity but by pressure, something in her chest, like a tug just beneath the ribs. The candle they'd lit weeks ago was still there, unused since their farewell. Its wax had hardened in a slant, frozen in the motion of having once melted. She sat before the piano. The lid was closed. It always was. Emily reached forward and slowly lifted it. The keys looked the same as always, slightly yellowed, worn at the edges, but the air around them felt denser, almost moist with static. She stared, fingers hovering above the ivory, and then pressed a single note. C. Then G. Then back to C. The sound rang out softly, echoing into the room like breath inside a tomb. Then behind her a sound. Floorboards gently shifting. She turned. Mark stood in the doorway, holding his laptop to his chest like a shield. "I found something," he said, voice flat, "and it's not good." He sat across from her at the kitchen island, rain tapping steadily at the windows behind them. His laptop sat open between them, screen glowing against the dim light. A website badly formatted, ancient-looking, filled the screen. An old article, dated 1995. Swayze Ranch assistant dies after tragic fall. The photo was grainy. A middle-aged woman, smiling faintly, her arms crossed in front of a studio mirror. Her name was Joan Elser. She had worked for Patrick and Lisa for almost 5 years, part-time assistant, studio cleaner, sometimes choreographer stand-in. Quiet, reliable, never in the spotlight. Then one evening, after a long rehearsal in the dance studio, she was found dead at the bottom of the stairs. The article was short, clinical. No foul play suspected. A tragic misstep. But then Mark clicked another tab, a comment thread on a conspiracy forum, buried in an old corner of the internet. A man claiming to be a former neighbor recalled hearing screaming the night she died. Not a fall. A fight. Something violent. Emily read the comments 3 times, then leaned back, staring out the rain-slick glass. "We don't have a staircase near the studio," she murmured. Mark didn't look up. "No, but we do have a crawl space under the floorboards, and it used to be connected to a back staircase. It was sealed off." "When?" He scrolled further. "Right after her death. The rain didn't stop that night. It only got heavier. By midnight, the house seemed submerged like it had sunk an inch into the earth and was now holding its breath. Mark had gone back to the studio, headphones on, working through the edits. Emily remained in the master bedroom, curled on the bed with the photo box beside her. She kept taking them out one by one, lining them across the quilt like tarot cards. Faces, movements, moments frozen in time. She paused at one. A photo of Patrick, seated at the kitchen table, the same table, reading something in his lap. The edges of the photo were torn, like it had been ripped from a larger print. The background was out of focus, but a shape stood just behind him. A woman. Emily squinted. You could barely make her out. Her face was blurred, features swallowed by motion, but her posture was rigid. Her hands clenched at her sides. It didn't look like a candid moment. It looked like a confrontation. She flipped the photo over. A date. August 17th, 1995, 2 days before Joan Elser's death. At 3:12 a.m., Mark burst into the bedroom, pale and sweating. "Come with me," he said. "Now." Emily followed without question, heart already racing. They went down the hallway, past the mirror, down 2 steps into the laundry room, the oldest part of the house. The floor was cracked tile, and the wall near the sink had a strange outline, like a boarded-up window. Mark dropped to his knees and pried open the corner of a false cabinet. Behind it, a small door. He had found it by accident, looking for the source of a low vibration coming through the studio floor. When he pressed his hand to the ground, he felt it, a faint hum, like music through a wall, but not coming from above. Below, they opened the hatch. A wave of air hit them, not cold, stale. And from the darkness beneath the floor, a sound floated up, a soft, wet shuffle. Then another, and far off, a woman's voice. Not singing, not crying, just breathing. The flashlight beam cut a narrow path through the crawlspace, catching dust particles in the air that glowed like suspended ash. The walls were raw earth, reinforced with old wooden beams, and the ceiling was so low that Mark had to crouch, crab-like, as he moved forward. Emily followed close behind, one hand pressed to the wall for balance, the other gripping the flashlight with white knuckles. The air down here was different, still but not dead. It had the sour scent of wet wood and something else older, thinner, like pressed flower petals left in a book for too long. The crawlspace twisted unexpectedly, snaking far deeper under the house than either of them imagined. Emily's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Do you hear it?" Mark nodded. Breathing, not just one breath but 2, alternating, like dancers in perfect sync. One inhale just as the other exhaled. Almost musical, almost rehearsed. They reached a split. To the left, a narrow tunnel leading toward the foundation of the studio. To the right, a larger cavity braced with bricks, old shelving along the side, and what looked like a wooden stair frame nailed shut halfway into the wall. Emily paused before the shelving, lowering her light. The objects weren't random. Pair of worn ballet slippers, a broken music box with a swan frozen midspin, a small stack of papers, fused together by moisture and time, and in the far back corner a mirror. It was full length, framed in tarnished silver, and leaned gently against the wall at an angle that revealed the entire crawlspace behind them. And yet it showed something else entirely. Mark was the first to see it. He stared into the mirror, breath caught in his throat. "We're not alone," he said. Emily turned. In the reflection, they stood exactly as they were, but behind them, just at the edge of the glass's reach, a figure emerged from the dark. A woman, shoulders square, face pale and long, eyes blacked out by shadow. Her hair hung limp around her face, soaked through like she had climbed from a lake. Joan Elser. She moved in the mirror but not in the crawlspace. Emily turned quickly. Nothing. No figure. Just the dim dirt corridor and the low roof. But in the reflection, Joan stepped closer. And closer. Her lips parted, as if to speak, and the mirror began to fog from the inside. A handprint appeared. Small. Precise. Mark stepped back. "We shouldn't be here." But the mirror didn't let them go so easily. A sound began low, strained, a melody hummed without words. Joan's head tilted in rhythm, the hum vibrating through the glass. It was a piece Emily recognized instantly. It was the same tune that had played on the piano upstairs. The same one she had heard in her dreams. The mirror suddenly cracked a single line, splitting right down Joan's face in the reflection. But the glass held, distorting her features into something almost pleading. And then, in the background of the mirrored world, another figure emerged. Patrick. But not smiling, not graceful. He looked exhausted. His shirt was damp with sweat, his shoulders trembling. He stood behind Joan, his hand on her arm not holding, but restraining. His mouth was open, frozen mid-sentence. He seemed caught in a moment replayed endlessly. His eyes flicked upward and met Emily's. She gasped. "He's trying to tell us something." Mark didn't speak. He had sunk to his knees, staring at the mirror like it had just whispered a secret into his skull. Emily reached toward the glass. The moment her fingers touched it, a wave of nausea hit her like vertigo. Images crashed through her too fast to process flashes of a studio argument. Joan yelling, Patrick stepping between her and someone else. Then the fall. It hadn't been an accident. Joan had been pushed, but not by Patrick. Another presence. One filled with fear, desperation, a third person. A woman. Then the vision shattered. Emily fell backward, landing hard on the packed earth floor. The mirror went dark. The breath stopped. The hum went silent. And then, a whisper, not from the mirror but from behind the bricks. "Help me," it said. Later, after the authorities had been called and the property had been disturbed for the first time in years, they discovered a skeleton sealed behind the brick cavity. Female, mid-50s, signs of blunt trauma to the skull. No dental records matched, but the items buried beside her, the ballet slippers, the music box, were enough to identify her. Joan Elser had never left the house. She had been buried in it. The investigation was quiet. No charges could be filed, not after so many years. The records of who lived there during the renovations had gone missing. The case remained officially unsolved. But the whispers stopped. The mirror was removed. The crawlspace was sealed again. 2 weeks passed. The house felt lighter. Emily stood by the piano one afternoon, staring at the keys but not playing. Mark had gone into town. The windows were open, letting in the crisp autumn air. For the first time in months, she felt calm. Until a note played not by her hand. Just one. Middle C. Soft. Deliberate. Emily didn't jump. She didn't scream. She turned toward the hallway mirror, the one she used to hate, and walked toward it. There, in the reflection, was no figure. No shadows. No Joan. No Patrick. Just herself. But in the silence, a feeling remained. The sense of being watched, not out of malice but longing. Love, perhaps, or regret. And somewhere deep within the house, just beneath the floorboards, a final exhale. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.